Hello there. Is this a safe banking deal, or are we all being rushed headlong into financial oblivion? Within the next few hours, the Swiss authorities will probably have ripped up their banking rulebook and allowed UBS to swiftly buy up the troubled Credit Suisse that last week saw 60% wiped off the value of its stock. And to do this, UBS shareholders would have to be kept out of the decision-making loop. While we also hear that the Bank of England has been holding crisis talks with UK banks to assess how risky their exposure to the bond market could be in the face of rising interest rates. And people wonder why there's talk of another banking collapse. And you can bet your bottom dollar that just about every government and every financial institution around the world is hoping that this UBS Credit Suisse deal puts the chances of a total banking meltdown to bed. And hope is probably the operative word here. Or are they hoping this? Or do some, with shadowy WEF and UN-style connections, hope for another outcome? Now, the figure bandied about is for a sale price of up to $1 billion, which is about 13 to 14% of Credit Suisse market value at close of play on Friday. And that's the most the investors can expect to get back. A hefty haircut, as they say. Now, a lot of people will think this is too high a price to pay and that it should actually be nearer to one single Swiss franc. And others worry about the risk of a hurried sale and that UBS will be buying in haste and its shareholders regretting it at leisure later on down the line. And there will also be concerns that instead of having one huge bank in trouble, you could easily end up with one galactic-sized bank primed and ready to bring the whole modern economy to a grinding halt. As some have sarcastically said, isn't it wonderful to see the regulators and senior bankers taking such a slow, measured and steady approach to this extremely complex issue, and be able to get it all done over the weekend? And that's when the redundancy notices go out for all the duplicated staff in the new entity and the sell-off of unrequired bank real estate starts. Now, many people are talking about a lack of due diligence on the part of UBS if they do go ahead with this deal. What they're doing, they say, is something like buying an unopened crate at an auction with absolutely no idea what's in it. Will you be lucky, or will you get stung? Probably why UBS has reportedly got as much as possible underwritten and protected by the Swiss National Bank and FINMA as they can. Sorry, I mean underwritten by the Swiss taxpayers, of course. Now, if this goes ahead, then anyone invested in Credit Suisse will be virtually wiped out, and the lower the price UBS pays, the worse it will be for them. But you do have to wonder how much UBS really does know about Credit Suisse, and how long this discussion has really been going on. Maybe, as some pundits suggest, they've just secured the sale of the century. On top of that, given the scale of the problem for the Swiss authorities, UBS will have had the Swiss National Bank, FINMA and Credit Suisse over a barrel. And bear in mind, the Swiss banking reputation itself is on the line here too, so maybe even a small return for Credit Suisse shareholders is better than nothing, especially if they are connected to the likes of Saudi. But this won't help recover confidence in the markets. If there's no way any bank can be left to go under and must be bailed out and seemingly soaked up at a furious rush over a weekend by another bank, and in the process taking the target bank's shareholders down with it. Investors will be wondering if the bank stock they have in their portfolios is going to end up becoming as worthless as that of Silicon Valley Bank or Credit Suisse. And they might start unloading some, especially shares in some of the smaller ones from, I don't know, Italy maybe. I'm wondering what banking shares will be doing tomorrow morning when the markets open. Will disgruntled UBS shareholders start selling off? And remember, the San Francisco-based First Republic Bank is already in the sights, with the ratings agency Moody's having slashed its rating to junk status on Friday after the massive sell-off its shares saw at the end of the week. Is this the next one to be sold off over the next convenient weekend? It seems the slow-motion banking crisis will roll on, rushing us bit by bit towards central bank digital currencies maybe. Now, one of the first things the Swiss regulators did about this crisis was to allocate code names to Credit Suisse and UBS. Very important to do this, it seems. And Credit Suisse became known as Cedar, and UBS is Ulmus. You can imagine the whispers amongst those in the know in the corridors of power, bandying those code words about, can't you? It also appears that naming banks after trees in these circumstances is a popular pastime for code makers. Why they couldn't just call them by their real names is strange. After all, this fast-paced crisis isn't exactly a secret, is it? Now, some people comment about taking all their dosh out of the banks and stowing it safely under their mattress as they watch the global meltdown occur. The trouble here is that there isn't actually enough cash out there for everyone to do that in the UK. To give you an idea, according to the Bank of England, and they know about this stuff, there are 4.7 billion notes in circulation, worth about 82 billion quid. And that is somewhere in the region of 3% of all the money in circulation. The other 97% is in digital form and sits on a banking server somewhere. And unlike cryptocurrencies, you can't hold that in your own wallet like you can with cash. And just a quick heads up on crypto. HMRC is painting a tax target on cryptocurrencies. Yes, if you dabble in stuff like Bitcoin, it will be harder for you to overlook declaring any profits you make from them. From the start of the 2024 tax year, there will be an extra section in the self-assessment tax forms specifically asking about any crypto asset you have and any gains you've enjoyed. And HMRC predicts this nudging will gain them an extra 10 million quid a year in the following 3 tax years. All part, I gather, of making the UK a global crypto hub. Richard.
Well, it's a Sunday, and therefore, my friends, dearly beloved, here is my sermon of the week. Here we go. Last night, the brilliant Neil Oliver said, "Things don't make sense to him," when referring to what is happening in the world, And from a worldly point of view, he is absolutely correct. They don't make sense. And Neil Oliver is not alone. I hear many of the pundits that I respect and watch scratching their heads, wondering how the world ever came to be like this. And a worldly inquisitive mind will only ever pull out worldly explanations. Well, you could go down the route of believing it's all happenstance, but I think you will find our government and all the governments globally are working in lockstep with a global agenda. But that conclusion and hypothesis leaves out the ultimate question of why. What, money? No. The elite are more than capable of printing their own money, so following the money only reveals who the bottom feeders and middlemen are. Greed may be the recruiting tool of the shadowy figures in the background, but greed isn't the end game. And understanding that is the most important part of analysing the seemingly nonsensical actions of the global elite and our leaders. It's almost as if the minds of the most open-minded don't want to look at You know where I'm going with this. They don't want to look at one very old book. Yes, that book that foretold everything that is unfolding. Yes, everything, pretty much. Now, you could argue that other books have predicted the same, but they haven't. Sorry, the level of accuracy in that one book, which identifies and predicts world events happening right now that we are seeing in our newspapers, is unparalleled in terms of specifying the events and the sequence in which the world events would unfold. And most importantly, when the world events would take place. And that gives the timeline ordinance. Now, I know many of the events we are seeing today unfold were identified by a former goalkeeper in more recent times. But why is it so unthinkable for so many people to accept that the crazy world we are seeing today was foretold in an ancient book? Look, if you really want to, you can ignore that book and its writings, but that book will still be there on the shelf with its accurate predictions. And I know why people choose to ignore the intensely accurate predictions made in that book, because the predicted events which arise within the book fall within the generation of someone born in 1947 to 1948, when the State of Israel was created. Many Christians have been waiting with great excitement to see the specific events that are now unfolding, whilst non-Christians, it just seems like coincidental fairy stories. So what if it was all okay? So what if it was a bit accurate about the timeline? So I totally get why many of you don't want to listen to the predictions in that book, and forgive me for repeating myself from a previous video, but I'm talking of the predictions of nations being deceived by a medical intervention, then those that pushed such a medical intervention were unrepentant. Does that sound familiar? Oh yes, that is all clearly predicted in that one ancient book. And at the same time as this, as the aforementioned prediction, people will be giving up eating meat, and there will be a rainbow agenda. Yes, that is also predicted, just as one world government is, and many other events we are now reading about in the newspapers. It just confuses me as to why so many people are aware of the accurate predictions in that very old book, yet ignore that book. Maybe it's because if the book is right in terms of eschatology and predictive sense, it may also be right about everything else it says. And therefore, people are not ready to accept such a reality where that book is the ultimate truth. Anyway, do you find world events surprising and nonsensical, or do you have a frame of reference that gives them context? Leave your answers in the comment section below, and I will hopefully see you regularly over the next week, but I will be away celebrating my big 50. Yes, 50. Yes, I know I had a hard life, but so would you if you were me. That is all.